Hello, everyone. Welcome back for those of you who were here earlier. And if you are new here, welcome to our back-end ExpressJS workshop. We're so excited to have you. Now, if you probably checked in, right? Everyone has a wristband, hopefully at this point, right? And you may be wondering exactly how that works. Vincent here is our lead of engineering at HackSC, and he's one of the original architects of this entire Hibiscus system. And a lot of our infrastructure, right, Vincent, actually runs off of Express. So all the things that you're doing today, checking into the event, and so on, are done with Express. It's a pretty cool framework, and for those of you who are new, I'm pretty sure you won't regret learning it. So without further ado, please welcome Vincent to the podium.
Hi, hey guys. So yeah, let's build some cool shit. So today I want to just basically as a primer for backend development. I wanted to introduce you an introduction to ExpressJS. And let's build a cool API with it at the end. So a little bit about me. So as you've heard, I'm the lead of engineering. I basically architected, basically built the entire thing that you saw. So the application form, which is basically just a, this thing is too loud. So yeah, basically the application form, anything like the SSO that you went through, all of that, I architected it, and then basically just revamped it from like the old tech stack that we had. So there was like a lot of stuff, and I was a major part in just doing that thing for this year. I'm currently the junior studying computer science, but felt more like a senior. Um, I Last summer I interned at Coursera. I basically worked on a lot of like security stuff and dealt with a lot of like microservices. So I had like very strong exposure to backend. My stack then was mostly doing Java, Spring Boot, and just those things. But yeah, a lot of backend experience from then. Uh, I'm pretty passionate about like just building products, just using technology to empower those things, and just startups in general. I'm a passionate Vim user. So if you know what, who knows what Vim is? Yeah, good. Anyways, Vim is the best editor of all time, but I don't use it bare bone. I use it with something like Sublime Text or VS Code. But yeah, Vim is awesome. Favorite programming languages of the moment is Golang and TypeScript. And my favorite drink is cocoa milk. Yeah, I'm basic. Anyways, all right, enough about me. So before we go into like backend development, I want to talk a bit about like what is an API. So you heard these terms around a lot, but to be more specific, it stands for Application Programming Interface. What it basically describes is how two pieces of software can talk to each other. So in a typical like web app, you'd see like a front end, which is built in maybe HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or even React, or even Svelte. Yes. So that's the front end. Now the front end alone by itself doesn't have data. It doesn't have like anything you can do with it. You can't do stuff like, oh, I want to fetch like the last 100 users. Like technically front end can't really do that. You need something like a database. So a database is where you store data, just data, users, data, whatever. But the thing is like database alone, you can't really connect a front end to a database. And what you often need is a middle layer right here, which is called the backend. The backend is basically a server that sits between the database and the web application. And what it does is that it provides several ports for you to do it, and that's called endpoints. They're basically like URLs. So say, for example, you have like, I don't know, so you have something like a, I don't know, like a to-do app, right? And what you do want to expose is you expose services, and those are called endpoints. And basically, you expose services like, oh, get all to-dos. And you see it on like, they often use this as like an endpoint. And then you have like your URL with it. So I don't know, for example, api.hacksc.com, and then slash to-dos. This is like the endpoint, and there can be multiple endpoints that does several things. And so what the backend does is just expose those, and then the logic behind it is handled by the backend as well. And the front end, all it needs to do is know like, oh, what endpoints, how do you call it, and so forth. And then the front end the website can just fetch from it and get data. You don't have to go through like the database to do that because it's too complicated for the front end. So that is an API. Now, who have heard of ExpressJS? All right, cool. So as you have known, ExpressJS is a way to write a backend API with ease. And so what they coined that term as is a framework. It's the same thing with Svelte, as you have heard. Svelte is a framework. What a framework does is it makes your life easier to do with, and it abstracts a lot of like low-level stuff for you. So it's a framework. And what is so special about ExpressJS is the fact that it runs on a runtime engine called Node.js. Think of Node.js as like not really a compiler. So if you have like C++ and all of that, it's not really a compiler. It's basically like what it allows you to do is that you feed JavaScript into it in some way, some form, and then it will run code for you. So if you know like traditionally JavaScript, initially it's only for browsers. So really you can only write JavaScript in browser and execute in browsers. You can't really use it to run servers because it's not built initially to run servers. And so what Node.js does is that middleman to go from JavaScript to C++, which is like the underlying language of Node.js. That's what's it written in. Well, everything compiles from JavaScript to C++. And from there, it executes onto your server. And now you can run JavaScript on servers. Awesome. So Node.js is how you can write those Express stuff with JavaScript. But Node.js is way too low level. If you try to write a HTTP server with Node.js, you're going to find that it's really hard to do. And you thought like, oh my God, this could have been easier. Trust me, look at the boilerplate, like whatever. So Express wraps around it and makes your life easier to build stuff. So now let's talk a bit about like why someone would use Node.js. I mean, JavaScript sounds disgusting, not traditional. Like most of you guys probably know like Python or those things, which are known to be backend. But ever since the creation of Node.js, it actually has been a game changer. And now like top companies like Bangs or whatever, they all use it. But the remarkable thing about it is that it runs on only one thread. So let's think about that. Imagine you have a server. Here is your server. Here's your server. Right? That's your server. Some front end is going to call your server on this endpoint to-dos. Let's consider one of them first. Now the thing is that for just one front end, just one user, this thing works fine. But the problem complicates when you have like more users and more clients. Say for example, 100,000 users just pinging this thing all at the same time. To-dos, 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 a bunch of them. Now the solution to this, often for most programming languages and also other frameworks built on Python, such as Flask, or if you know all of that, is that they use threads. Thread is basically like a way for you to divide up tasks. So it's like, oh, one user is going to go do this. I'm going to create a thread to handle that endpoint and return it back to the user. I'm going to create like some more threads to just handle more stuff. Because with one thread only on your thing, it will blow your server. One thread cannot simply handle everything most of the time. So, but the problem with threads is that they are pretty funky. They are not lightweight. Every time you make a thread, it basically takes a lot of like consumption from like your server, CPU, and all that. So you can't create threads forever. And but then you really need to like support 1,000 users. So thread, you have to compromise the threads. But Node.js says, screw it. I'm gonna use one thread and one thread only. And with one thread, they can handle 1,000 users. And it goes through like a mechanism called asynchronous programming. Like they use async await and those kind of like things. I won't go too deep into it, but it was able to, from that thing, basically just runs on one thread. And so what's good about that is that you handle 1,000 users, same with like these other things, but you run on only one thread and your service lightweight as well. And you don't need to consume as much resources, less money spent on AWS cloud credits, and so forth. And so that's what's remarkable about Node.js, and that's why everyone should like just use it as your de facto thing. The second thing that's so good about Node.js is the fact that you write JavaScript. JavaScript is like basically like the programming language for web devs. You write like JavaScript on the browser, but now you can also use JavaScript to write backend servers. So voila, now I get more money because I'm a backend developer. So that's one. And third thing I mentioned, written in C. It's basically written in C++. Everything goes down to C++. And so that's why it's so performant, because your server, when it compiles down, it's C++. So yeah, that is the intro to Node.js. Any questions so far? All right, cool. With no questions, I want to do a little lab. So we're going to create a small to-do list API. You guys can follow along. We're going to set things up on your computer and all of that. But there are 4 things that we want to do. So the first thing is there will be a get endpoint for getting all the search terms. For getting all the to-dos of you. The second one is to create a to-do. So you can create a to-do task. Third, edit a to-do. And fourth, delete some to-dos, not all to-dos. So yeah, let's get started. So the easiest way to get on with this is to follow the official direction of ExpressJS. So you can create a directory on your terminal, and then you do this to like initialize your project, and you install Express. Express is basically a dependency that you will use. So let's get started on that. God, this is too small. So yeah, this is my terminal right here. That is my terminal. And I'm going to basically npm init. I'm going to say why so that it accepts, like, because it's gonna go into these like options and all that. I don't want that. I want to be quick. So I do this. So what it has created is this package.json file. Let me know if you guys don't see it on the back. But yeah, this is your package.json file. And what it's gonna hold is quite a few things, like name, version, all of that, and also scripts to execute stuff. But we don't care about that. What we care about now is installing Express. So npm or install Express. This will install stuff in your folder, and you see like Express is your dependency here. All right, so we're all good. All right, now what you do here is you create a file. Let's name it main.js. And here's basically like your top level file. You execute this file to do stuff. And so we can do something that's very simple, like, oh, console log hello world. And let me get my terminal. And then what you do to do this, and by the way, you need Node to reinstall in your computer. So Node, and then main.js. And see, hello world. So that's one. Now let's get a bit more complicated. So this is how you build a typical server. There are a lot of boilerplate codes, but all you need to know about this is basically you're making an app. You're defining a port. A port is something, it's like a way to serve things on your computer. So for example, if we do a port 3000, I'm going to demonstrate, then you can access your thing at localhost 3000. So let's just copy this, as all developers do. We copy things on Stack Overflow. And so the basic structure is app, and then this defines a get. So a get is one of like those points you're getting, and then this slash thing here is basically just saying like the very root of the application. And so the get function takes 2 things. First is the endpoint. And second is something called a callback. A callback, this is basically just a function defining how, what get needs to do when, a user calls this slash endpoint. So what it's doing here is basically just saying rest. So response, rest stands for response. And then it's sending hello, a string back called hello world. And then, so that's one. That's how you make an endpoint. You can make other endpoints by doing, I don't know, to-dos, whatever. And then you handle it like so. And this is where basically the app listens to a port on your computer. And the port is 3000. So let's run this, see how it works. Node main.js. So you see the example app is listening on port 3000. Now what port 3000 means is localhost, which is your basically your computer IP. Localhost. Let me know if you can't see that. I can't zoom in any further. And then you have this colon here, and then 3000. Hello world. And now that's the slash endpoint basically just refers to nothing. But if you do to-dos, as we have done earlier, you see like a different thing. Hello to-dos. So that's how you serve like just different endpoints. So without further ado, let's get to building it. So again, we're doing a to-do list API. You can get all to-dos, create a to-do, edit a to-do, delete all to-do, delete a to-do. So let's do it. So what I want to do here is, this is a get endpoint. I want to get all to-dos. So before I get all to-dos, I need to store my to-dos somewhere, right? What do you guys think is a good way to store your to-dos? Anyone can go. I mean, sorry. Let's. Yeah, ideally it would be on a database. Yeah, but we can do it on a file system, or we can. What? Sorry. Yeah.
You want it to be persistent or not?
No. Yeah, you just. What about a variable? A variable? What data structure? Yeah.
A JSON object?
Yeah, kinda. A bit more simple than that. Yeah, pretty much. So a list, right? When you imagine in your to-do list, whatever. I mean, it's a to-do list. So you store it in a list. Like for example, oh my God, I'm overdue for HackSC. I'm gonna get roasted. So yeah, it's just a list. It goes top down and so forth. And so we're going to make a list. So we're just going to declare a simple list right here. This is how you write a to-dos. And then what we do here is we're going to get all to-dos. So very simple. Just it can't get simpler than that. Just get to return all to-dos. So I have this tool here called Postman. It's basically for testing endpoints. And I can basically say it's a get request, do a to-dos, and then this URL just corresponds to the server, which is at 127.0.0. It's the same thing as localhost and 3000. And all right, before I do anything, I can run it. Oh, I'm running it. But I need to restart. All right, cool. So let's run it. All right, cool, nothing. Now let's try to do the next endpoint. So the next endpoint is basically creating a to-dos. So to create a to-dos, we need to get two things, name and description, passed from the request. And so what you do here is, for those kind of things, you do a post request. So it's like, there are these methods. Get is basically for getting data. Post is a convention for like just creating data on the server. Put means editing a resource on the server, which is a to-do. And delete is delete a resource on the server. So how people often do it is that they pass things in a body. And so a body is, just a JSON file. We have name and then key and then value. So I want to pass in name, hello, and description. So let's do that. So when a person pass in that, we need to get that on our side. So what we do is the rec basically the rec object allows you to have this body method, and then you can do like name, and then that will get like the username, the name. Oh, and before you do that, I'm gonna do this little thing to help with it. This is basically just to like tell it to, oh, you parse JSON bodies. And then my description. Yeah. So those are the two things that we kind of get from the application. And then all we're gonna do is, just push it in to it. I'm going to push it as a push in an object. So say ID. Now let's say name first. Say name and then description. So that's going to create name and description for that one, and then we can return something, anything. Create, saying created. All right, cool. Now we can reload our server, and then let's get all the to-dos that we have right now, and then let's create one. All right, I created 3. I should see 3. All right, cool. Right, so that is that. The next thing we can do is basically just edit a to-dos. And for this one, what we want to ideally do is that we want to do something like, we want to do an endpoint like this. We can do put to-dos and then pass in like the ID of the task on it. We don't have an ID right now, but we can do things like this. We can set an ID for each task to be just, the length of the current to-do list. So if it's 0, the task you are going to add in is have ID 0. If there's only 1 in it, the task ID is going to be 1. So we can do this. Pass in here. And the idea here is that I want to get that ID on this 0 one. This 0, I can set to 1, 2, whatever, but I want to capture that in my API. So what I do here is I do this. Use this colon thing to denote that this is a parameter going in. And so same thing for I get that ID, and then to get the ID you do rec params, and then now the ID, which is the name of this. Okay, cool. And then what I do here is I edit that ID. So I go to dos. I basically just, we can do something like this, to dos, and then we can do ID, because these are very straightforward. I know this is not going to work in the real life, but this is workable. We can do this, and then we can do something like name, rec, body, name, and description. Okay, body, description. So that will basically just set our new, whatever to do on that ID to be able to do this, the thing that we created. And yeah, we can return something. We can return the to-dos at that ID. All right, cool. So yeah, we can test this out actually. Term. So let's get all to-dos. Create 1 to-do, create 2. Now I'm going to get like the ID of the first one. I'm gonna set the first one to name is something edited. And in your original one, you see that has been edited. So yeah, you edited your to-do. Now the last part is to delete. So what you do in delete is we also want that ID. And then we're also getting like rec res test. Do the same thing, very typical. Params ID. And then what we do here is that we set the to-dos. We filter out the ones that that doesn't have, that the ID is not equal to this ID we have. What this basically filter does is that it's gonna get everything that's like not that. And so at the end, you get like everything but the ID that you want, and then you set it back into the to-dos. So you get like the ID, the list without it. And then we can do, to confirm, we can send it back the to-dos to make sure we do things right. Yeah, and that should be it. So get all to-dos, create a to-do. I can edit this to-do on location 1. You should see that here. And now let's delete number 1. Oh. Bug. Yeah, I don't. Either way, you get the point. But yeah, that is basically the idea of ExpressJS, and that's how you build a simple to-do list API with ExpressJS. And yeah, that concludes our presentation. I know it's a short one, but that's what ExpressJS is. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'm open to questions. Thank you.